Hi, my name is Silas Miami. I am a filmmaker, a writer-director. I have doubled a bit in academia, teaching writing and screenwriting over the past few years. The projects I've been a part of have been quite an exciting kind of space to explore what screenwriting means to Africans specifically. So I'm happy to share a few tips and tricks that I have picked up along the way. And today I'm going to explore character in building character Bibles or building character profiles. And I won't be able to cover everything in this short clip, but I will give you some of the key elements that I ensure are in all of my projects before I even consider showing them to anyone or before I consider going into production. Understanding your character is really important when you're building your story because emotional stakes always trump physical jeopardy stakes. I would much rather see a character's growth and be invested in a character's journey as opposed to really exciting physical jeopardy stakes. And if that's the case, then there needs to be a thorough understanding of how you have shaped and built the people in your life, in your story. I think emotional stakes are carried by your character and the journey that they embark on. And because of semiotics, which is the science of science, everything your character interacts with conveys some kind of meaning. With books, I'm able to have interiority into whoever the protagonist is in the story because we are told what they're thinking. But in film, unless you develop a reliance on narration, the only way we can access the interiority of a character is through revealing elements in action. And one of my writing mentors, Selena, mentions that you have to hope and fear for your character. And I think that friction between hoping for the best for them and also fearing for them, that friction creates a kind of conflict that we need. But when you're doing character work, you have to do research because you only know what you know. You only know what you know. So as a function of that, create the character Bibles. Now, I want to come out early in this conversation and let you know that character Bibles are essential right at the beginning, but there are instances, very many instances, where you will have developed an idea of who you want your character to be and have gone in depth and then switched over to the writing process and found yourself on the script and you're seeing the character sort of evolving into something new and something new. So allow room for the evolution of your characters. But right at the beginning, right at the top, right before you start writing your first interior house XYZ, I feel like you need to understand who your characters are. And you can find examples and templates of psychological and physiological profiles online. I encourage you to go grab some because they will help you understand your character inside and out. This is the hard labor that kind of comes with the writing process. To understand your world fully, this is the work that you need to do. Not everything that you end up researching and putting down on paper will show up on a screen or on your script. It's essential for you to understand the backstory as a writer, just so that the decisions your character made are informed by their personality, by the persona that you created. Part of why we do the psychological or physiological profiles or character Bibles is because your desires as a writer might clash with the desires of the character. Before we jump into this, I encourage you to practice intentionality when committing anything to paper. Every decision your character makes has to have a reason. So, these are some of the key elements that you will find featured in your traditional psychological profile for your character, but I kind of want to go a little into why we're asking these questions. First, we need a full name. We need a surname. We need to identify who this person is. You can go even as far as finding a nickname for them. I think naming something is bringing it to life. So names are important, names are essential. Think about the names you give your characters. I believe that the most important takeaway here is these three elements. Your character's want, your character's flaw, your character's need. We're navigating these three aspects in establishing your character's journey. You need to identify your protagonist's very tangible, external, environmental goal. What is their quest? What is their desire? Why are they on this journey? And it pertains to the concept of your film. So for instance, a character might want to become rich and famous. So that's a very external environmental goal. And that's the surface level sort of journey that your character will be going on. And this is closely linked to the second aspect of character development that's important, and that's the need. Now, the need is essentially the lesson the character needs to learn in order to attain that want or desire. And very often you'll find that the want or desire shifts as they learn what they need. So, someone who wants to be, if your character wants to be rich and famous, what they might actually need is an internal sense of security. Are you seeing how that kind of balances? And between the want and the need is the flaw. So if they want to become rich and famous, but they essentially need to find an internal value system that will give them that security that they're seeking, in between is the flaw. Why are they not able to achieve the goal right at the beginning? Why are they not able to identify the need right at the beginning? And it's usually linked to the flaw. So the flaw could be, for instance, the insecure. So the statement stands as, the character wants to be rich and famous because they're deeply insecure, the flaw. And what they need to do is heal whatever wounds that they had through therapy and other means, whatever actions, whatever events you choose to expose them to challenge their want and desire. So you need to straddle the line between the three. Identify what the want is, the external desire, identify what the flaw is, what is the lesson that they're going to learn through this, and then identify the need, the internal stuff that needs to be worked on. My undergraduate lecturer in production design used to describe it as a block with massive holes in it, and you are just trying to block up the holes. And that's essentially what being alive is, being a human being is. We're just trying to shove things in those holes so we can feel less empty. So here are a couple of questions that you need to answer as you develop the core value system of your character. What one word could you use to describe this character? What is the core value that drives them? It could be loyalty, it could be professionalism, it could be a myriad of different things, but you need to be able to identify what their core is. What gets them up in the morning? Look at what the general philosophy of your character is. You know, what statement do they live by? Are they the get all the work done at all costs? Are they achieve my goals at all costs, regardless of who I step on? Or are they a sacrificial lamb? You know, what is the philosophy that informs the decisions that they make? What important life-changing decisions does this character make in the course of the story? As you're standing in that intersection between your needs, your wants, and your flaws, they have to be expressed externally somehow, right? They have to appear on the screen somehow. They have to appear on your script somehow. So this is where now the action comes into play. How do you establish someone's want? How do you establish their want to be rich and famous? You know, do they use their resources to try and get as much clout as they can? How do they move about gaining the kind of influence they want to achieve that want and that desire? And you think about, how are you going to establish the flaw? How do we know what's quote unquote broken in the character? How do we physically establish that? What events can we put there to physically establish their flaw? I'll give an example. If one of your characters is perpetually angry and someone steps on them accidentally, tries to apologize, but your character throws a fit and throws a chair at the other person. Yes, I've been watching way too much Money Heist. You know, that tells us the character has anger issues. To be simplistic, that's a flaw. They have anger issues, and resolved anger issues or insecurities that they haven't dealt with. And I've gotten all of that from the action of rejecting an apology and overreacting. So how do we establish that flaw physically? Usually this is where you kind of bring in, you know, allies or foes or whatever it is to kind of hold the mirror up to your character, or to challenge your character, or to call your character out. That could be an option that you choose to use. But whatever you put in your character Bible, you have to figure out a way to reveal it in a tangible way, because audiences will not know what you don't show them. Without going into an extensive workshop, I'll give you a couple of questions that I'm hoping you'll be able to answer that will potentially help you get to the point where you've built a three-dimensional character. Think about the values that drive your character. Is it professionalism? Is it loyalty? I encourage you to distill it into one word. It'll make it easier to kind of pin it somewhere so that it's a reference point for you. Every time you think about your character and the decisions that they make, you're like, what drives my character? Okay, in the case of Killing Eve, I think what drives this character is emptiness. She's empty. She doesn't feel anything as a function of her being psychopathic. So how do you solve not feeling? You look at the ways in which people have managed to feel, and then you ascribe the same actions to yourself. She tried out love, and then she felt something for the first time, and now we're in this twisted web. Look at the general philosophies that guide your character's actions. Do they like to just keep their head down, work hard, and strive to produce the best body of work? Or are they blaming the external world for everything that's happening to them? Are they aware of their faults? Think about what guides them, what moves them. 3, think about what important life-changing decisions your character makes within the narratives. And this will inform your actions. What do they do? What are these actions linked to their needs, wants, flaws? Are they going to do? That's where your beats come in. That for me is where you develop your action. And I know some people start from, horse before the cart, where they're like, I'd like a story where this and this happens. But before you have your explosions, link them to your character and your character's journey. The physiological aspects that you need to interrogate. What age are they? What height are they? Weight, eye color, skin color, appearance. Are they built? What does that tell you? When you see someone who has all the muscle in the world, what does that begin telling you? Because the moment we see something, we're inferring meaning into it. Again, linked back to the conversation we were having about semiotics. So everything the audience or your reader sees is giving them information, and they're able to paint that world. So you need to be deliberate about those decisions. You need to think about styling. What do they wear? Because what they wear conveys information. How do they move? Are they lanky? Do they have posture issues? What are their mannerisms? Do they gesticulate a lot? Their health, their fitness. Think about these aspects in order to build a three-dimensional character, because you're exploring aspects of their lives. I need you to explore their occupational life, their sociological life, their professional life, what their hobbies are, what their skills are, what amuses them, what languages can they speak, what religion and denomination are they linked to, what's their race, their nationality, their political affiliations, what do they think about the current zeitgeist? What's their sexuality? What's their sex life like? Are they repressed? Are they open? And then as you answer these questions, link it to your character's past. So for instance, if they have issues with sex, why do they have issues with sex? You can even boil it down to like a particular moment. He walked in on his parents having sex and that scarred him for life. Or sex education was just not an option in the household. Therefore thus. So this is how we continue building up our character and making our characters interesting. And just before I wrap up, again, I'm aware that I've not been able to cover everything here, and that will be tricky, and it will require you to do a bit of research and to dig in deeper in how to build character Bibles. This is just like a template for how to start. You have to keep a few things in mind. Characters are what they do, how they react to situations. That's what reveals who they are to us, not through exposition or derivation. It's through their response to events. Please note, I think the characters take on defense mechanisms to kind of work out their complexities. So what do those defense mechanisms look like? Because we don't want to reveal too much about ourselves as human beings, unless you've gotten to a point where you understand that there's safety in vulnerability and in discussing really difficult subjects. That's rarely an option out there. So a lot of characters hide them through defense mechanisms. What do those defense mechanisms look like? Are they quick to anger? Are they slow to anger? Do they hide? Are they evasive? Do they avoid all confrontation? Do they engage confrontation? Now, I know I've spoken a lot about the protagonist, and I would like you to have a key focus on who the protagonist is in your story. But it wouldn't be right to explore character without thinking about your point of conflict or your antagonistic force. Very often, a lot of us will have actual physical embodiments of antagonism in people. So we'll have like physical, like people who are antagonists. Sometimes I've met writers who create situations as forces of antagonism, and that's all nice and fancy, but I'm going to focus on having a human being representing your antagonistic force. I encourage you to make your antagonist charming and equally match them to your protagonist. What I find is that, and this might be controversial, but your protagonist is the flip side of your antagonist. They are the same person, two sides of the same coin. And we are naturally predisposed to root for the protagonist. I'm a huge fan of the villain, even though I know they're going to lose every time. But because we're rooting, hoping and fearing for our protagonist, and we want the best for them, I kind of want you to, I'd like you to put the strongest words in your story in the mouth of the antagonist. Give the strongest argument to the antagonist. One of the reasons why I enjoyed Black Panther, despite its many, we can go into discussions about it, but one of the reasons I really enjoyed Black Panther was because Killmonger had a point. The antagonist had a point. And it got the audience slightly divided, where like, yes, you're hiding resources that could potentially help other people of color outside of this space. That speaks to the character, the people who live here. You don't load the dice in a way that it makes it easy for us to root for the protagonist. Make the protagonist work for it. And the best way to do that is to match them up with an antagonist who can challenge them. I'm going to encourage you to look at antagonism in three levels. You have your internal conflict. A good example would be like, I'm trying to come up with movies that all of you have watched. In the Mood for Love, the story of two neighbors whose partners are having an affair, so they start an affair. The female lead struggles with aspects of loyalty, being loyal to the marriage, and finding herself attracted to this man who is also suffering the same fate she is. So that's more internal. And then think about conflict between people, antagonism between people. So this is like the most tangible one that we have, where we can be like, so-and-so doesn't like so-and-so, therefore they're pitted against each other. That's the most obvious form of antagonism that we're exposed to. Then on the third level, we find ourselves exploring antagonism as a function of extrapersonal forces, where society acts as the antagonistic force. For instance, you create a dystopian world where there's clear societal bias. How are you going to explore that? I'd like there to be antagonism on those three levels: within, between people, and as a function of a societal or a universally understood position that the majority of the society leans towards. A good example is Joker and Batman. This is essentially one person talking to himself. Joker and Batman are the same person. They're each other's shadows in a world of archetype. The antagonist cannot exist without the protagonist, which makes them one in the same. And that, for me, is where you find compelling character development. So, as we wrap this up, let's do a quick summary of what we've covered. I need you to focus on creating a three-dimensional character who has strong emotional stakes. And the emotional stakes will inform the physical jeopardy stakes. True character reveals itself under pressure. You want to hope and fear for a character. Build psychological, physiological profiles. You can find them on the internet. I gave you a couple of examples of things to kind of explore here. And even if you don't include them in your story, the backstory informs the decisions you as a writer make. I encourage you to practice intentionality. Everything you put on paper has to have a, say it after me, reason. There we go. We looked at the three key aspects of how to build your character's journey. That's their want and desire, external, their need, internal, and their wound or flaw. And this is also internal. But how do we express all three in action? Because that is the is the core tenet of the medium. We need to see it. We looked at some of the questions you need to be asking about your character, what their core values are, what their philosophies are, what decisions they make in order to shift the course of the narrative. One of the things that you have to ask yourself is, why is this decision difficult? The decision needs to be difficult, because if it's not difficult, then the dice is loaded too heavily on one side, and there's no conflict, there's no tension, and we're not interested in the story anymore. It needs to be a difficult decision that is being made. We looked at this, the physiology of your character, age, sex, height, weight, hair color, skin color, appearance, styling, movement, posture, mannerism. What do they look like? Are they healthy? Do they work? What schools do they go to? What amuse them? What hobbies do they have? What talents, skills, what occupational traits are they carrying? All these questions need to be answered. Here are some miscellaneous things that you just need to consider as you develop a character. Why should you be telling the story? What makes you the authority of the story? What connection do you have with the character? And why should we trust you to bring the character to life? And I know some of us like to answer this by saying, this is my story, or this story really happened. First of all, real life is boring. Real life and medium of filmmaking, while one informs the other, this is a construct that has limitations, that has time limits linked to it, that has limitations in terms of like what we can do visually and what we can express. So like we found ways to imbue semiotic meaning in editing and sound, and everything sort of informs your consumption of the film in the end. So it's not just enough to know the story inside and out because you experienced it. Because what I often find is you get one or the others. Either someone is too close to the subject or too far removed from it that they're not able to get to the ugly crux of the story. And that's where the juice is. The ugly, unlikable, messy bits. That's where we start to hope and fear and hate and love and engage with characters. So your challenge might be having to collapse the space between you and the character to go in closer. And I find this to be true about writers who want to tackle stuff linked to family and trauma. You end up making these almost angelic characters who don't have any flaws because you really loved your grandmother. They're not compelling characters. If you don't show us the ugly parts, if you don't show us that they are human, that they're fallible, that they're prone to failure, then when they actually win and succeed, we won't feel that payoff. We won't feel that satisfaction of having witnessed growth. The psychology of the character is linked to the structure that you choose to employ. I want you to be careful about the dialogue that you use. Don't use it as a crutch to be too expository. Exposition is good, but use it more as like a flag post to guide, as opposed to just reveal information that can lend itself to being a bit lazy when you're writing, and you don't want that to be the takeaway. Oh, one last thing. Secondary characters do not know that they're secondary. They deserve as much effort and work as you put into everyone else. Granted, you will not have the time to create 20-page character bibles for the man who's in the back for 2 seconds, who says, hey, and then walks away. Fair. But you need to be able to kind of understand who they are and what they're doing, what the intention is in that moment. They can't just be used as a vehicle to achieve something, to achieve a goal, or to facilitate the movement of your character from point A to point B. It's akin to employing Deus Ex Machina, which is acts of God. Please don't have acts of God in your story. Not like as of let the events be intentional. Give agency to your characters. Let them make decisions, and then explore the consequences of those decisions as linked to whatever journey your character is going through. That is how, as a filmmaker, you are informing your audience. You are communicating to your audience. You are saying something. You have a point of view. Don't make any work if you don't have a point of view. Now, I know I have crashed a lot of information into the few minutes this will end up being, but I encourage you to do a lot more research, to treat your characters as if they're autonomous beings existing in your head, and sometimes you'll get into a fight with them. I have gotten into many a fight with people in my scripts because I want them to do one thing, but because I've created such a strong character base, they're not able to do the thing that I want them to do because they're beings on their own. So I just have to kind of practice some kind of fidelity to that base that I've created. And again, it can shift. It will shift as you write. Allow that room for evolution, but as you change things, do it again with intentionality. Have a purpose for why you're shifting things, have a purpose for why you're shifting some characters. Sometimes you need to meld two characters together to make them more exciting. The truth of the matter is, existence is frankly quite boring. Our interactions every day, if we were to record them, would be flat. This is why aspects of editing, sound, blah, blah, blah come into place. And we have limited time to explore huge emotional ranges. So how do we take advantage of the position we find ourselves in? I hope I was able to help in some regard. Look, I understand that it's a lot of work, but that's what we do when we're creating worlds. When we're creating worlds from our imagination, and the work will pay off. Again, this isn't a catch-all for everyone. Different people have different ways of kind of navigating that, but I feel like these tips and tricks have allowed me to move quicker through the process of developing work. Great. Happy writing. I will probably do one more of these, but from like a more personal writing space. And I hope you're good. Take care. Did I just thumbs up?